If any of our beloved listeners can make any sense out of that paragraph, you win a free year of Armed Lutheran radio listenership.
You get to listen to the next year of Armed Lutheran Radio free of charge.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 146. We're counting down towards 150. Brought to you by Cook's Holsters once again, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST, that's one word, ARMEDPODCAST, and get 15% off your order at cooksholsters.com. Again, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your day, and happy Thanksgiving to all of you. I hope you had a safe and joyful holiday with loved ones, good friends, and great food. We've got a tip today for you from Mia Anstein. We've got another Clinging to God and Guns segment with Pastor John Bennett. But first, a little bit of news from this week. We talked last week about the way society has changed, about the culture of death and moral decay that contributes to the violence and the evil that we see perpetrated on our fellow citizens by our fellow citizens. A perfect example of that moral decay popped up this week. In the news of the death of Christian missionary John Allen Chau from Oklahoma. John traveled illegally to the Sentinel Islands off the coast of India. He paid someone to ferry him there against local laws, hoping to make contact with a prehistoric tribe of inhabitants on that island and to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. Well, the inhabitants of that island apparently have a history of not really taking kindly to visitors, and so a law was passed, a local law forbidding people to visit from the outside world. So like I said, John paid somebody to ferry him there against the law, and he was subsequently killed. It's human nature to laugh at people whose poor decisions lead to their untimely demise. The robber who walks in, tries to rob a store, and then gets shot by everybody in the store because everybody there is a concealed carry permit holder, or the anarchist thug who gets knocked out by some counter-protester, or the daredevil who falls to his death trying to make the latest viral video. One could certainly make the case in hindsight that John Allen Chau's death is not surprising, or that maybe he shouldn't have gone. You could still be saddened by his death, though, and compassionate towards those who knew and loved him. But in this case, the responses to the news reports of his death have been shockingly callous. Rather than expressions of regret or sympathy, most are simply anti-Christian rants, condemning him for trying to force his beliefs on the indigenous people, mocking him for his beliefs, suggesting that he deserved to die for trying to force his views on others, and generally laughing at his death. A young man who died a violent and untimely death, trying to bring the message of hope and peace to the lost halfway around the world, being spat on by a bunch of people on their computers in mommy's basement. To me, it's just another indication of how little value our society puts on life. But if you think about it, examine it a little more closely, that only certain kinds of life have value now. We hold vigils for the victims of mass shootings, but we ignore the gun violence in our inner cities. We mourn the celebrity billionaires who die from drug overdoses, but we celebrate because Hurricane Harvey wiped out a bunch of people who supposedly elected Trump. We march and riot when criminals are killed by cops, but we celebrate abortion as a human right. We're saddened when celebrities lose their homes in wildfires, but we do nothing about the homeless veterans on our streets. We're enraged that the government might detain illegal immigrants to keep them from coming into the country and potentially causing harm to our fellow citizens, but a Christian deserved to die because he was forcing his beliefs on indigenous people. Whether or not you would have made the same choice that John Allen Chau made, we should all be mourning his loss. A young man traveled around the world to a remote island, leaving behind the comforts of the first world to bring the good news of Jesus Christ to a primitive people. Before you make fun of him, ask yourself what you're willing to sacrifice for the good of others. Is it just time on your keyboard, or are you actually getting up and doing something? What he did, no matter what you think of it, was far more brave than all the keyboard commandos who are making fun of him. At the same time, this reminded me of the Reverend John Piper. We've talked about him previously on this show in our Clinging to God and Guns segment. He has suggested at various times that we should adopt the attitude of martyrs like John Allen Chau when it comes to self-defense. Chau, like most other Christian missionaries who suffered the same fate, was unarmed. He went to the island to save those people, to save their souls, risking his own life with no intention of defending it if he was attacked, and he was. We should never confuse the selfless, defenseless acts of martyrs like John Allen Chau or Nate Saint or Jim Elliot or Roger Guderian with the obligation to protect our families and our neighbors. Allowing yourself to die at the hands of a home invader is not martyrdom. Martyrs like John Chau and others are answering Christ's call to spread the gospel to all nations. It's a fulfillment of the Great Commission. Defending your family against criminals who would rape or murder them is fulfillment of the Great Commandment, to love your neighbors as yourselves, to risk your own life to defend the lives that God has entrusted to you. I hope you'll give that some thought as you think about the fate of John Allen Chau, and you'll keep his family and his friends in your prayers. All right, that's enough to think about for today. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come back with Mia's Motivations. You're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Be sure to check out all the other great podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net. Let me take a minute to tell you a little bit about our good friends at G4G Guns. After surviving an attempted kidnapping and having co-workers robbed at gunpoint, Patrick and Cassie Coburn decided to get a gun for protection, and that led them to teach others about the need to protect themselves and to be proficient with firearms, and that led to the creation of G4G Guns. It's an amazing store and an even more amazing website where you can shop for any gun, ammunition, accessories from the comfort of your own home and buy without any gimmicks or credit card fees. If you want the personal touch, visit their store at 175 Bear Road in Van Alstyne, Texas, or stop by and see them at a gun show near you on the weekends. They're great people. They offer great service, great prices, an amazing selection, and no hidden fees or gimmicks. Check them out at g4gguns.com. That's G, the number 4, guns.com. G4G Guns, the galaxy for great guns. g4gguns.com.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey there, everybody. I am so happy to be here with you again. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope that you're excited about December. Hopefully none of you guys got caught up in that Black Friday rampage that happened at a few locations. But there's something that I saw on Facebook. I'm a member of a group on Facebook. It's called the Lutherans' Wives Group or something like that. But anyways, I commented on a friend's post asking where she should go to church, and somehow through this, I ended up in this group, and I actually like it, and it's really enjoyable. They share some really great things on there, and over Thanksgiving, they shared a link to kfuo.org and a Facebook Live that they put out over Thanksgiving. It included Judy Token, who is a founder of a self-defense group, an organization. She teaches self-defense She has instructional videos. And while I'm chatting with you, I don't know if you can hear, there's some self-defense going on behind me. My two little short dogs are beginning to wrestle. I may have to get them out of the room. Hold tight. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Everybody just seems to be in such an uproar. But anyways, talking about this wrestling and fighting and self-defense, Judy Token founded this self-defense group because she has two young daughters and she wanted them to be able to defend themselves in certain scenarios. I also have a daughter. She's in college. She's unable to carry a firearm, and she knows some skills for self-defense, at least to break a hold, break grips, and at least try to flee a situation. Striking and stuff like that comes along later. But if you would like to see some of Judy's demonstrations, you can watch videos, and she has a lot of instruction. You can learn tips, and her site is called thegreatflip.com. This is a great thing. It's something that everybody, not just young ladies, but grown ladies and men and boys, everybody should know different things like this. It's becoming more and more common. It seems like maybe it's a social media thing and we just see it more because of social media, but it does seem like people are being attacked a lot more than they were years ago. I don't know. Let us know in the chat over at Fans of Armed Lutheran on Facebook. I'd like to hear what you all think. Do you think these occurrences are happening more often, or do we just see them or more aware because of social media? Let me know. What do you think? On that note, I hope that you all have a wonderful December and that you remember the reason for this season, which I know that's just cliche, but I really do hope that everybody will remember the reasons that we celebrate the big holiday in December. Until next week, talk to you later. Bye, my friends.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstein.com.
Let me take a moment to tell you about our good friends at cooksholsters.com. Not only are they a sponsor of the show and the Armed Lutheran radio shooting team, they're a company that I trust and believe in. Why? Well, when I first got into concealed carry, when I got my concealed carry permit, it was really amazing how much I didn't know. I picked up a holster from my local range, one of those cheap prophylactic holsters, you know the kind. They collapse when you take the gun out. You can't reholster them safely. I have to admit, I was one of those guys. When I started learning more and taking classes and reading and watching videos, I found out that there are better holsters out there. I learned about the advantage of Kydex holsters, and that's how I discovered Cook's Holsters. What makes Cook so special as opposed to other holster makers? They make an outstanding product. They sell printed Kydex to many of the other holster makers, and their subsidiary business, Cook's Molds, actually makes the molds that other holster manufacturers use. Cook's Holsters is an American success story. Born in the founder's basement, Cook's Holsters grew so much that Mr. Cook left his job to make holsters full time, and he hired people to help fill orders and meet demand. Custom molded to fit your firearm, Cook's Holsters are available in a wide array of colors and printed patterns, including your own artwork. They're available for carry, for range work, and for competition. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. They're adding new gun models every month. I trust them for everyday carry and for competition. Visit them today. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and save 15% off your order. They offer a lifetime warranty and a 100% money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied. Check them out at cooksholsters.com.
Up next, we're clinging to God and Guns with Pastor John Bennett.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for Clinging to God and Guns, where we analyze the gun rights debate from a Christian perspective. We're joined again by our good friend, Pastor John Bennett from St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. Pastor, welcome back.
Thank you, I think.
Well, we're again... we're dipping back into that cesspool of Christian heresy, pathos.com. And this episode, just so you know, right up front, again, brought to you by ibuprofen.
And Jim Beam.
And Jim Beam. We're looking at an article that was posted on, it would have been October 31st at the United Methodist Insight blog. which is apparently hosted and published by St. Stephen's United Methodist Church in Mesquite, Texas. They share Dr. Thomas's works extensively from Patheos, but they're very careful to disclaim her views, saying that all the viewpoints expressed on the blog are those of the authors and not necessarily those of St. Stephen's. But given how widely they publish her stuff on that blog, I can't help but think that they support a good bit of what she rambles on about.
Yes.
She is described as the thoughtful pastor, describing yes, Reverend Dr. Christy Thomas, aka the thoughtful pastor, describes herself as an opinionated Jesus follower, a retired elder in the United Methodist Church, a questioner of everything, and a lover of grace. She is an author, a newspaper columnist, and she blogs at The Thoughtful Pastor at patheos.com.
She's basically Nancy Pelosi in a clerical collar. That's about the best way to describe her, and this is a good example of why when anybody from the UMC invites you to their church, run far, far away.
Yeah, we've talked at length about the problems in the UMC, and this is the kind of thing that drove me to leave many years ago. She's written articles about how did she escape her right-wing religious past. She opposed, obviously, Brett Kavanaugh, and basically said, "Look, we've already got a sexual predator on the Supreme Court with Justice Thomas, so we don't need another one." She wrote this awful rewrite of a biblical parable to describe how to deal with those terrible Trump voters. She thinks it's time to blow up the United Methodist Church, figuratively, not literally, because they're standing up for definitions of biblical definitions of sin, and that's nasty and hateful. So it's time to get rid of things and start over. The United Methodist Church isn't crazy enough, basically.
Right. Well, and she refers to Trump as, in one article, as the village idiot, and that same article she calls him a racist. She characterizes him as mentally crazy. So that's that is the canvas that we are dealing with in this artful masterpiece of Armed Lutheran Radio.
Yes. If Antifa had a church,
they would probably crucify her for not being radical enough.
Yes, that's true. That's true. The one that floored me and tells you everything you need to know is one she wrote in May of 2017, where it's entitled 7 Pieces of Institutional Clutter That the United Methodist Church Needs to Leave Behind.
Yes, I read that.
The number one thing that the UMC needs to give up is the idea that relying on the Bible alone to answer all questions of theology, doctrine, and church structure. They need to get rid of that.
Yes.
So now that you know what we're in for, this article was written in the wake of the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh, and it's entitled, "After Pittsburgh, I can no longer wear a cross." So here we go. "My husband gave me this lovely cross a couple of years ago," and she shares a picture of it. "It's one of many beautiful ones I own and have worn over the years, but I can no longer wear any of them. I can no longer identify with a symbol of oppression that opens the doors of murder and anti-Semitism." Just let that ruminate for just a moment. What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, because it was a Roman Catholic priest who went in there and murdered all those poor faithful Jews. Oh wait, it wasn't.
No,
it was a Trump hating Nazi. Go figure.
Exactly. Before Constantine took over Christianity and subordinated it to serve the power of military and political conquest, the symbol that followers of Jesus tended to use to identify one another was the fish. It was laden with rich meaning and free from any idea of death, destruction, suffering, and murder. But murderous leaders need murderous symbols, and this one suited fine.
That's not why the cross was chosen as a symbol. My gosh. Just hearing those words, I mean, I read them 2 or 3 times already, but just makes my head hurt.
It really does. I mean, this sounds like some piece of garbage that I wrote when I was 18 and a freshman in college. When I walked away from the faith. This is the kind of thing that I wrote.
Really?
It just, yes, this is terrible. I cannot believe a person who has spent her entire career in the church could write this. This is and miss the fact that yes, the cross is a symbol of suffering, but not oppression. It's a symbol of the suffering that Christ went through for us.
Right. It is a visible representation of God's incredible love and compassion for us, that he would give his son over unto death, that we should not suffer eternally. But somehow in her crazy mind, that's anti-Semitic.
Because of these people, I will no longer wear it, the cross. And she lists out the names of the victims of the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting. I can no longer mark myself with a symbol, with a cross that has, yet again, wreaked such indecent violence on such utterly decent people. I sat last night trying to figure out the connection between the symbol of the cross and the shooting at that synagogue. I still have not figured it out. I don't know what she's talking about here.
Well, you know, the swastika is just a rebranding of the cross. Didn't you know? I have no idea if that's where she's getting this from. But I searched quite a bit for this kook, this evil Nazi piece of human excrement that shot up that synagogue. And nowhere is there any reference to his religious affiliation. So maybe she just assumed because he was killing Jews that he must be some Christian wearing a cross.
That's, yeah. I've seen, I went through every post I could find, what do we know about the shooter? And I was surprised that they actually mentioned that he was anti-Trump. I was surprised that they even mentioned that, but every post from every outlet that I could find mentioned that he was anti-Semitic. He had anti-immigrant rants on his social media, and he was anti-Trump. I don't know how that becomes Christian.
Well, the only way that I can perhaps reach that conclusion is that this evil person, I mean, he doesn't deserve to be called a man, but an animal of some sort, that he misquotes John 8 verse 44, and he says Jews are the children of Satan. John 8:44 is when Jesus is reprimanding the Pharisees and tells them that they are children of their father, the devil. Jesus never said Jews are the children of Satan, but yet because he says that and he puts John 8:44 in parentheses, perhaps that's where she's coming up with this nonsense. But there is nothing anywhere that indicates that this man was a person of faith in any way.
That's as close as we can get, folks. It's a humongous stretch, but that's as close as we could come. And the truth is, and what she misses about this whole incident, her suggestion that this guy did this because he's a Christian or because Christians believe this or something, or Christians are anti-Semites. Most of the anti-Semitism, the vast majority in this country, comes from the left. And it's all based not on religion, but on these kooky conspiracy theories that Jews are running the banks or that they're secretly running the government or that kind of stuff. The vast majority of even going back to Nazi Germany, it was all this conspiracy theory about nothing, not about religion. It was all about their control of
Right.
things. And so, and it all in this country, the majority of the attacks on synagogues and on Jews, that stuff's going on, perpetrated by members of the left, but you won't hear it in the mainstream media.
Yes, and you have yet to hear anyone on the left, anyone that is of any prevalence, to publicly condemn Louis Farrakhan.
Exactly.
And yet this is the guy that refers to Jews as termites who need to be exterminated.
Right. Talks about how it's a gutter religion, and yep, exactly.
It's interesting though, because this nut job that shot up the synagogue, part of the reason supposedly that he did this is because somehow it was Jews bringing in Muslims into the United States.
That makes good sense.
Which shows you just how mentally depraved this guy was. But that supposedly was his motivation. I'm going to kill a bunch of Jews because Jews are advocating to bring Muslims into the country.
Listen to this next line. Those of us who have called ourselves Christian had better figure out that the person we say we worship was not a Christian, but 100% Jewish. He came to offer a fresh vision of Judaism, a return to its roots of being blessed in order to be a blessing.
False.
That's as stupid as the guy who said we're not Biblians. Remember that guy? We don't worship the Bible.
We're not Biblians. Jesus was 100% ethnic Jew.
Yes.
He was the Son of God. He didn't need to go in the temple and, offer the ritual sacrifices and all that stuff because he's the sinless Son of God. This idea that he's 100% religious Jew is completely idiotic on its face. And he didn't come to offer a fresh vision of Judaism. He came to fulfill the Old Testament sacrificial system that was a prefiguring of his sacrifice upon the cross.
Yep.
If any of our beloved listeners can make any sense out of that paragraph, you win a free year of Armed Lutheran radio listenership.
Right. You get to listen to the next year of Armed Lutheran Radio free of charge. Jesus recognized the importance of the law and the deeper meaning of true holiness and profound love. He did not come to destroy the faith of his ancestors, but to celebrate it.
No.
Right? So the whole "no one comes to the Father except through me" thing, what was that about?
That must just been a later editorial mark by someone who was trying to supplant the Jewish faith with this new breed of religion.
I guess.
Why is she even a quote unquote Christian? This is the thing that I find so idiotic about this article.
Right.
Why is she then a Christian? Why isn't she a practicing Jew if that's the case?
It sounds like an argument for Judaism. I don't understand how a pastor, a priestess in the Methodist Church could be arguing this stuff. This makes no sense whatsoever.
Correction.
Oh, yes.
Priestitude.
Yes. Thank you. Exactly right.
And I feel bad laughing because this is such outright heresy and blasphemy. But I can't help but laugh, or else I'll lose my mind.
Right. Yeah. That's why it's infuriating and hilarious at the same time. It's Jesus didn't come to destroy the faith of his ancestors. He came to change the faith of his contemporaries. He called on the Jews of Israel to take up their crosses and follow him. He said, he is the way, the truth, and the light. You reject him, you're rejecting the one who sent him. And he wept over Jerusalem because he knew they were going to reject him in the end.
Right. And when Jesus, he said, speaking of the Old Testament scriptures, he says, these are they, meaning the scriptures, that testify of me.
Mm-hmm.
That this Old Testament stuff, it's all about me. Now, if Jesus showed up to, try and offer a fresh vision of Judaism, our kooky author's words, then why would he have said that, hey guys, guess what? All that Old Testament stuff was about me. No, what he would have done is said, okay, let's keep studying the Old Testament. Forget about anything that, happened since Judah Maccabees and, which is incidentally, interestingly enough, that's for any of you who enjoy a little bit of intertestamental history, that's where they get the tradition of Hanukkah.
Mm-hmm.
But we won't go into that because, well, we don't have the time. Anyway, none of this makes any sense because Jesus also, when he was in the temple reading from the scroll of Isaiah, he talks about, and it was a passage that was a prophecy of the coming Messiah, that the blind would see, the lame would walk, and so forth. And then he rolls up the scroll and he says to all these Jews sitting there, this has been fulfilled in your hearing. Jesus made it explicitly clear that he is the fulfillment of the Old Testament system of Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
That if he was just here to create a 100% Jewish vision, that we would not be celebrating Christmas next month.
Exactly. Well, and how many times did the Pharisees challenge Christ because he wasn't upholding the Jewish laws, right?
Right.
If he was here to offer a fresh vision of Judaism, why wouldn't he just and uphold the faith of the ancestors? Why wouldn't he then agree with everyone who challenged him about his interpretations or his new ideas?
It's interesting though, because the charge that was levied against Jesus so often by the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin in general is that he wasn't following the Jewish laws,
mm-hmm.
that he was violating the Jewish laws. This bag of Fruit Loops says Jesus recognized the importance of the law and the deeper meaning of true holiness and profound love. Jesus says that he came to fulfill the law, and yet he was considered as a lawbreaker by the Jewish authorities.
Mm-hmm.
So what version of the Bible is she reading? I don't think even the Jehovah's Witnesses get this stupid with their Bible.
And here's where she tries to pin it all on us. We've blown it. I am sick at heart, so sick I have not been able to talk about it. Note that she'll go on for another page, though. And what is
irony abounds?
Yes. And what the heck is this we stuff? I mean, who is this we that she's talking about? How did we blow it? Well,
she blew it with her heresy, but I digress.
Some years ago, I had the privilege of deep acquaintance with a Holocaust survivor. Through one of those wrinkles in time and space, I formed a sister-loving relationship with a woman whose parents both got through the endless years in German concentration camps. Most of the
That's
rest...
a bit hyperbolic because they did come to an end.
The endless years
yes.
that did end eventually.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to make light of that, but such gross exaggeration for dramatic effect is just irritating.
Yeah. The Holocaust is horrible enough without the hyperbole. Most of the rest of the large family were destroyed, but Sarah and David, married only days before the German Nazis. Notice she says German Nazis. She's trying to make a distinction here. Imprisoned David managed to find one another afterwards. Sarah, terribly damaged mentally and emotionally from the horrors, was never able to embrace me as her daughter's friend. But David, seeing how his daughter and I loved one another, called me another daughter and brought me into his circle of love and kindness. One day we talked about his faith. He had lost all hopes of faith by the horrors he experienced and witnessed. Here it is. Mostly perpetrated, quote, in the name of that Christian God, lowercase g.
And this is where I'm going to call BS on her story.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, fully discredit her claim that she had this friendship with the Holocaust survivor. I'm calling BS on the point that this man claimed, according to her, that these horrors were perpetrated in the name of the Christian God. That is BS. If you know absolutely anything about the history of Nazi Germany, Hitler tried his best to eradicate Christianity because he saw it as a threat to his power. And he created a new religion that was intended to supplant all of the religions that claimed that the Aryan race, quote unquote Aryan race, because what exactly is an Aryan, no one knows, but that the Aryan race was created by this god of some sort, and that all other manifestations of humanity were inferior and therefore should be eradicated. That was the religion of Nazi Germany. It was not Christianity. Christianity was suppressed.
Right. And and there's, even if we are charitable here, even if we put the best construction on it and we accept that this friend of hers believed this, that doesn't make it true. And it's certainly not something that you would condemn the entire religion as a result of. If you are willing to lose faith because of something that's not that you're completely wrong about, how strong was your faith in the first place?
Right, right. The putting the quote unquote best construction on everything, she not only is biblically but also historically illiterate.
Yes. And I think here in the next couple of paragraphs, and I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I'm gonna skip a little bit, and this is where it all, in her warped mind, makes sense. One day, his daughter, this survivor of the Holocaust, told me another story as we were worrying together about the state of David's health. David's the Holocaust survivor. While David was in the camp's sadistic leader had randomly selected one of his friends for yet another beating. The friend was terribly weak. She goes on to tell how David volunteered to take his place. And David survived, but from that point on, for 60 years, he never had one moment free from pain. This is the ultimate Christ act, coming from a man who had completely lost his faith and who suffered endlessly at the hands of those who said they were acting in the name of Christ. I have never heard anywhere that the Nazis believed they were acting in Christ's name.
No. And again, BS. I am sorry. And what is so heinous about her writing this is how many of the libtards that read this garbage and buy into this are going to now be repeating this. That they're going to be running around saying that this Nazism, this anti-Semitism, this white supremacism, that this is all perpetrated in the name of Christ. She is an enemy of the cross. I'm glad she's not wearing the cross anymore, because she is an enemy of the cross.
Mm-hmm.
I would not want anyone to mistake her for a faithful Christian. So I want to say thank you for taking the cross off.
Yeah.
What a heretic. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, even to the extent that the Nazis claimed that God was with them, and some of their equipment actually had that emblazoned on it. Gott mit uns. God is with us. But just claiming that God, a God, lowercase g God, is on your side doesn't make it so. And for her to suggest that she would lay down the cross and reject it as a symbol of oppression because of the Nazis, what the actual hell? I just don't get it. How anybody can make that connection?
You got to go full retard to make that connection.
You got to go absolutely full retard, pedal to the metal full retard. And here's where it all ties together, and you'll understand where she makes this connection. In the last couple of years, I've watched entirely too much of the U.S. Christian community stand solidly behind an immoral man whose words and actions have incited massive amounts of violence and hatred toward anyone except white male Christian, quote-unquote, Americans. In this time, I've come extremely close to following in the footsteps of David and losing my own faith. There you've got it.
So it's Trump's fault.
Yes. Nazis hated the Jews. Trump is a Nazi. So Trump hates Jews, and so Trump supporters who claim to be Christians also must hate Jews.
Yeah.
That's the tortured logic of the left. She said, "This is a sick parody of true faith. No longer will I wear the cross. I will stop identifying with this kind of Christianity. It's one small step to saying to those dear Jewish people, I'm sorry, my tears are mingling with yours. This is wrong." She is a total whack job.
Yes. And to use her words, her brand or whatever term you want to use of Christianity, to use her words, this is a sick parody of true faith. That's what I have to say about her and her religion.
Yes, because if you're willing, based on this story and your hatred for Trump and the fact that evangelical Christians don't support the Democrat Party, and you're willing to lay down the cross, a symbol of God's amazing grace to a world full of sin, you're not a Christian. How can you hate Trump and his supporters so much and spew this stuff and still talk about love? I mean, Trump's grandkids are Jews.
Right. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem, something that presidents have been promising to do since the time of Ronald Reagan, and he finally did it darn near 30 years later. Well, it was 30 years later, in fact.
Worst anti-Semite ever.
Yes. And this is what just dawned on me, where she rails against evangelical Christians. And so often that is the mantra you hear from these leftist fake Christians. And I'm sorry, I'm not the kind of person to denigrate anybody and question the sincerity of their faith, but I'm doing it today. That the reason that they have such a strong hatred for quote unquote evangelical Christians is because evangelical Christians, by and large, still profess the Bible to be the only source of theology, to be the only source of doctrine and faith. And she's made it clear that she wants the UMC to get rid of that, to get rid of this notion that the Bible alone, it should be the sole source of our doctrine. That's where the division is between these liberal Christians and quote unquote evangelicals. It's about the Word of God.
Exactly. So Trump hates immigrants, and Trump supporters hate immigrants, and the shooter hated immigrants. So Trump has to have caused this whole thing. It's all Trump's fault.
And the stupid part about all of this is the shooter hated Trump.
I know, that's where just that's the one little thread that she can't seem to tie together. Oh, gee whiz. So how are we to as Christians, how should we think about Judaism today, and how should we treat those who worship the Father but reject the Son?
Well, first and foremost, we should respect them, and at the same time, we should pray for their conversion, because Jesus plainly says that no man comes to the Father except through me. Well, that includes women too. For those of you who don't understand the English language, that the word man is often used to refer to humanity. The word man's in humanity, mankind. So,
you sexist, misogynist, no good Trump supporter.
I just triggered every SJW Antifa listener in our audience.
Pulling their hair out.
But we ought to view Judaism, Old Testament Judaism, not the modern manifestation of Judaism, but Old Testament Judaism as the prelude to Christianity. That, this is one of the things that many historical critics get wrong, is that they say, well, Christianity begins with Christ. No, that's why Christians still embrace the Old Testament. Now, granted, there are some heretical sects out there that reject the Old Testament, but for Christians, we see Christianity beginning at Genesis 1:1. So we see Judaism as having its history intertwined with ours, but where Judaism ends, Christianity continues.
Right.
But there's another aspect to this too, is that we see Christ as coming to fulfill all the Old Testament prophecies, that he is the true Passover lamb, that the Passover lamb that was sacrificed as recorded back in Exodus, that was a prefiguring of the greater lamb of sacrifice to come, Christ Jesus. And so in many ways, we see the Christian faith that it has supplanted some of those Old Testament practices, especially regarding the sacrifices and rituals that were required of the people of Israel. And so, one thing to also consider in this is that one of the stark contrasts that we see between Christianity and Judaism is that Judaism has departed from the sacrificial system, at least Judaism today.
So to wrap all this up, final thoughts on this, because unfortunately, I suspect that she's not alone in believing this stuff. And the reason that St. Stephen's United Methodist Church in Mesquite, Texas, would publish her so thoroughly is because they don't object to these ideas.
Yes.
John Wesley, for all his faults, would certainly not have espoused these kinds of views.
No, he would not have. He'd be rolling over in his grave if he knew what was going on.
All right. Final thoughts before we wrap this up?
My head hurts too much. I don't know if I have any final thoughts. Final thoughts. No, Jesus didn't come to create a true Judaism. He came to give his own life for the salvation of sinners. No, what happened in Pittsburgh wasn't because of Christianity or the cross. What happened in Nazi Germany wasn't because of Christianity. And anyone who thinks this, they ought to be locked up in a padded cell to keep the rest of society safe from their stupidity. There's my final thought for today.
Perfect.
I did not mince words at all this time, did I?
No, she didn't leave us much room for mincing words because she is an absolute lunatic. Well, thank you so much for enduring this with me. I really do appreciate it.
Misery loves company.
Absolutely. Couldn't have done this. I looked at this and I thought about doing this last week when you weren't able to be with us, and I was like, I can't suffer through this alone. There's just no way. It's not fair. I should share this joy with my good friend John.
Well, thank you for being so sharing. I appreciate it.
Folks, if you have any questions about anything that you heard here, need a recommendation for pain relief or adult beverages, or if you have a question or a comment about this episode or any other, visit our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback. Leave us a voicemail or a voice message or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another edition of Clinging to God and Guns, right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org.
And that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. Thank you all for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. Thank you to our fine sponsors who make all this possible. Thank you to my awesome cast of contributors. And thank you, dear listener, for listening, for downloading, for subscribing. I hope you'll join us again next week. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.